Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello once again, and thanks for joining us for Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm David Percy. On the no flood watches, warnings, or advisories out anywhere here. Not much change from yesterday, except for a little more open area now along the Tanana River, back up through here. Otherwise, everything sort of holding at a stationary status quo. And moving on to the fire danger, kind of high today in this shaded area here, mostly north or west of the mountains into the Kuskokwim Valley, up back around through most of the Tanana Valley, eastward over toward the 40-mile country, Northway, Tok, in those areas. And that should improve this evening, of course, as the humidities go up after when the evening progresses and the overnight period. And looking ahead to the satellite imagery, you still have this dissipating frontal boundary right across and just off the coast, off the North Gulf Coast, a little bit of a wave right in here, kind of enhancing the precipitation there. But again, it's all staying off the coast. Nothing reported this afternoon at either Cordova or Yakutat. And not much going on over the northern southeast coast. A few isolated showers up there, but a little more continuous rain down over the southern areas there, especially Prince of Wales Island and on over toward the Ketchikan area, seeing more precipitation than they did farther up to the north. Otherwise, the interior here, a lot of sunshine, light winds, temperatures this afternoon warming into the 50s to near 60 in some areas. And then back into that low cloud and fog condition on the central and eastern Arctic coastal areas. Little flurries, a few flurries there around Barrow and areas of the east side. Winds kicked up 15 to 25 miles an hour there along the eastern Arctic coast out of the east-northeast. For example, Deadhorse had gusts to 30 miles an hour this afternoon. And then some IFR up there also. The lowest station I could find was at Atasuk. They had a half-mile visibility in fog. Ceiling's about 500 feet up there, but you go just to the west where the wind flow is a little more offshore. Clear skies at Point Lay, and this batch of clouds right there, just some cirrus. Otherwise, a lot of clear skies down across the Kotzebue area, Seward Peninsula, even out into the St. Lawrence Island area. Quite an VFR, actually clear sky area out there today. There was some patchy lower stuff around, but much more extensive down toward the Pribilof Islands with winds gusting 30 miles an hour out of the north there at St. Paul with fog all day, a little bit of moisture in the form of shower activity, light shower activity there over the eastern Aleutians, as well as the Alaska Peninsula, some of that remnant moisture working back to the southwest there. This whole area of cloudiness will begin to shift southward. Actually is doing so now. One upper level low right in this area. The whole thing's going to start dropping southward. High pressure building in advance of this next storm system, which is the center, which is back here. Actually a couple of them, one right in here and another one back up over the Russian Far East. That's going to push northeastward eventually. Some of this moisture breaking off and coming down across the eastern Aleutians. Shemya had winds kicking up to about 40 miles an hour this afternoon with light rain and fog in that area. But again, not much going on with this frontal boundary other than the light rain in areas of the southeast coast, back up along the North Gulf Coast. That should move to, well, actually, it's not going to move a whole lot at all, just tend to dissipate in place just about. Chance of showers up along the coast, possibility of some more light rain over the Kodiak Island area there, really from Seldovia all the way back down to Akiak. in that area, but amounts will be light, and rain or showers scattered along the southeast coast. Yakutat may escape with nothing at all, as well as Juneau. No change over the interior, just some variable cloudiness possibly moving through, especially up to the northeast and over the eastern interior. Isolated showers early this evening over the mountainous terrain of southern Alaska, like the Wrangels and Chugach Mountains, maybe even the Talkeetnas. Otherwise, pretty nice conditions. Bristol Bay looking really good. Very weak trough and some flurries out here up to the northwest. But watching this warm front advance eastward, and looks like that thing will push some moisture into the Pribilofs tomorrow in the form of some drizzle, keeping the flying conditions low there as it does, and look for a significant increase in the south and southeast winds there for St. Lawrence Island, especially into the afternoon as this system approaches. Could see some rain and fog with that. Otherwise, another nice day over the interior. A few showers beginning to develop in the afternoon hours along the mountains, the Alaska Range. Taller clouds developing into a little bit more a heavier shower, but nothing really significant up there. And this all mostly restricted to the mountainous terrain. A few showers lingering here. That front now completely dissipated. Just some leftover moisture from the Prince William Sound area back into the Panhandle, just isolated to scattered showers with some partial clearing and sunshine as well. Watching the next system here, that's taking a turn to the north and is actually going to pull back to the northwest at some strength. So that should bring the winds up a little bit tomorrow afternoon on the south coast. But looking at Tuesday, that'll pull back here to the west, and you can see it's pretty weak at this point. But a frontal boundary should push into the southeast coast there. It won't be much of a wind producer, and actually a little bit better rain producer, especially over the southern areas. You can see a fetch of moisture coming up from off the map there. Another warm front down here. So it could get some pretty good rain into the southern areas, much lighter up to the north. But it looks like just about the entire stretch of the coastline there we'll see rain. That includes Yakutat, cutting off right around the Cordova area. And the clouds cutting off right around Prince William Sound. Otherwise looking for a sunny day here, possibly Kodiak Island. Definitely Bristol Bay, right up northeastward across the Kenai Peninsula, Manauskas-Susitna Valley areas. Really nice day coming up on Tuesday. Temperatures approaching 60 in some areas, back up to the northeast. And then this front advancing inland, bringing a chance of rain as far east as the Koyukuk Valley there, and maybe even a little farther to the east, and that warm air pushing northward. But should stay chilly enough for whatever precipitation falls up along the Arctic coast up there in the North Slope in the form of snow, but light snow. And in fact, the south winds in advance of that system, that'll be the kiss of death to any significant snowfall that may occur up there on the east side. Better chances of seeing something back to the west, then a few showers behind that breaking out, but the frontal boundary right across Norton Sound, so it looks kind of pretty cloudy, rainy, foggy, lowest flying conditions there, and then good south winds. Look for occasional rain, drizzle, fog, IFR there for St. Lawrence Island, all the way down along in advance of that frontal boundary. Could see some gale force winds with this next system, that low tracking just north of Shimei in the afternoon hours, so look for gusts possibly as high as 55 miles per hour, or more likely 45 to 50 miles an hour in gusts here as that front advances into the eastern Aleutians. Winds coming up but staying dry over the Fox Islands. Alaska Peninsula looking pretty good there, just some variable cloudiness, light winds and possible sunshine, showers behind the front moving eastward. For temperatures this afternoon, 40s to lower 50s across all the southeast coast, about the same for the North Gulf Coast, mid 40s to mid 50s. 57 in Palmer this afternoon, but Wasilla is up around 60 degrees. Talkeetna at 57, Copper Center 51. And Fairbanks up there, the warmest location plotted on the map here at 4 p.m. with 59 degrees. About the same over at Tanana, 43 Fort Yukon, while Bettles had 50 degrees, 37 at Anatuvik. And the Arctic coast, anywhere from the upper teens to mid-20s across most areas there. 33 at Kotzebue, 25 Shishmaref, but a nice 44 degrees down at Nome, 43 over at St. Michael, and a 45 at Amonic, but just 32 degrees here at Hooper Bay, 32 also at Toksook Bay, and 34 out at Gamble, but notice the upper 50s right down into the Kuskokwim Valley with mid 50s even out toward, well, Holy Cross and down toward Bethel. For the Aleutians, upper 30s to lower 40s, and about the same for the Pribilofs. A little cooler though, mid 30s there at St. Paul and St. George. 39 on Alaska, mid 40s for the Alaska Peninsula with Pilot Point at 51. King Salmon 52 degrees and a 54 at Dillingham. For the lows tonight, some areas possibly dropping below zero. Most areas won't though, with single numbers to teens, and then into the mid 20s across the Brooks Range. Upper 20s to lower 30s here over the interior, upper 30s over the southwest part of the state, upper 30s to lower 40s for the Panhandle. And for the highs tomorrow, much like today through the interior, 50s pushing up to near 60 or even 61 in some areas, and that area from the central Tanana Valley all the way down into the lower to mid Yukon and Kuskokwim River Valley areas, and even the Delta is getting up into the mid, possibly upper 50s as well. And a nice day for Bristol Bay as well as South Central Alaska once again. Flying weather, possible IFR here along the North Gulf Coast, and then offshore. Otherwise, they had VFR, or they have marginal VFR forecasts for the entire southeastern area there. Some of that hugging the coastline here, Kodiak Island. Marginal VFR, possibly becoming VFR for Tuesday. And then some marginal VFR, of course, as there always is, just about out over the Bering Sea with some IFR extending through the Bering Strait, across St. Lawrence Island, and IFR possible there on the eastern Arctic coast. Not so much so on the west side. For passes, otherwise, notice the Aleutians, mostly VFR there, east of Nikolsky, or west of Nikolsky. And for the passes, marginal VFR possible in the northern entrance of Anatuvik tomorrow. Adigan, though, could be marginal at times at some point in the day tomorrow from north to south. And Lake Clark and Merrill, though, VFR, rainy VFR, windy VFR. And Isabel, Mentasta, both those passes will be VFR. Tanita, VFR. And Portage, again, could see some marginal stuff again sometime tomorrow on the eastern entrance. Otherwise looking pretty good. And for Chilkoot and White, marginal. For the freezing levels, 2,000 feet all the way up into, well, near Kivalina just about, and then back down to the south along the North Gulf Coast into the Panhandle, and a broad push of warm air coming up. This is for late tonight, actually early tomorrow, very early tomorrow with that system up here over the Russian Far East. So could see 68,000 foot freezing levels coming into the southwest Bering Sea. And then for icing, possibility here approaching St. Lawrence Island as that moisture comes in from the west. And then with another system late in the day, possibly coming into the western Aleutians. Otherwise, just some leftover scattered stuff here. Increasing a little bit down to the south, spreading up to Prince of Wales Island with that next system, depending on its exact track and strength. It should pull enough moisture up to increase the icing threats a little bit there below 12,000 feet. And for the winds aloft, main jet still cutting in south of the Queen Charlottes tomorrow. But out here to the west, we have it all the way up, arcing up into the Bering Sea, almost the northern Bering, 150 knots there. Then it takes dives southward, almost to Hawaii there. So if you're going to take a flight from Cold Bay to Oahu or Honolulu, tomorrow would be a great day to do it and pick that tailwind up. Otherwise, light variable winds there across the interior under basically a weak area of high pressure. And for the 9,000 foot winds, southeasterlies 40 knots might catch the southwest area, Prince of Wales Island. Lighter winds to the north. Easterlies at about 20 here across the northern Gulf of Alaska, becoming light and variable along and inland of the coastline, then turning southwest 10 to 20 knots, but really back to the light conditions, 5 to 15 farther to the north, and southerlies at about 20 knots from Kivalina up to Point Hope. Much more significant here through the Bering Strait down to St. Lawrence Island. With that frontal boundary pushing eastwards, could see some 45 knot winds in advance of that. Southwest, pretty strong, 60 knots or 30 to 60 knots, and 35 knot winds. Western Aleutians, under the ridge axis, just 15 knots for the Adak-Atka area. Pretty light winds, very light winds here across Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula. 3,000 foot conditions, much the same with the light variable winds through here. Lighter winds, central Aleutians picking back up southwest 25 to 30 knots. That area taking a turn to the north there ahead of that front, right across St. Lawrence Island, about 40 knots, 5 to 10 to 10 to 15 over the interior, mostly from a southwesterly direction, light and variable right through here. Easterlies possibly up to 20 knots there. Still have that band of easterlies coming across the Gulf of Alaska. And again, some pretty strong winds possible with this system as it begins to drift northward and then pull back to the west. That, when it does that, that should keep most of those winds off the coast. And for turbulence, possible moderate chop here, widespread moderate chop for Prince of Wales Island if those winds do develop, and then maybe some lighter stuff here along the North Gulf Coast, but nothing significant at all. Arctic coast, gusty winds, areas of moderate turbulence below 5,000 feet, and also from Nunivak Island up through the St. Lawrence Island area, right into the Bering Strait there, next front coming in, so look for it to be a little bumpy in advance of that system. And after the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
The beach on the southeast side of Montague Island stretches for nearly 80 miles of pristine wilderness. At least it looks pristine from a few thousand feet up. As our helicopter descends towards the shore, big chunks of white styrofoam come into view.
You see all the big globs of styrofoam? That's all tsunami debris. Yeah, there's definitely, there's more styrofoam out here. There's no question.
Chris Pallister would know. He's president of the nonprofit Gulf of Alaska Keeper. The group has been cleaning up marine debris that washes onto Alaska's shores for 11 years. And when the tsunami debris began arriving last spring, their job got a whole lot harder. Pallister has visited Montague Island nearly a dozen times since then. And by the time we land and step onto the pebble beach, he's shaking his head in disgust.
I mean, you're basically standing in a landfill out here.
Pallister points to an area scattered with styrofoam bits smaller than packing peanuts.
So you see what's happening here with all the crushed up styrofoam now? This is what we're worried about. This styrofoam's just going to get all ground up. And you can see there's just the billions, trillions of little bits of styrofoam scattered all over everything.
The smaller it gets, the more concerning it is.
The smaller it gets, little pieces like this, is virtually impossible to clean it up. I mean, to clean this up right here, you have to take out all this organic matter with it. And, you know, extrapolate that all up and down this coastline. It's kind of an impossible job.
The trash is not just an eyesore. Pallister says voles, birds, and even bears are eating the styrofoam and plastic. He's also worried about chemicals. Among the debris, he finds containers that held kerosene, gas, and other petroleum products. Even the little containers worry him. Sifting through the trash, he picks up a small blue bottle and unscrews the cap to inspect its contents.
I have no idea what this was. It looks like just dish soap, maybe, laundry detergent, but it's empty, which is maybe not a good sign. But there's thousands of bottles like this all up and down the coast, from small household chemical items to drums full of chemicals, big industrial-sized drums.
Marine debris is not a new issue in Alaska, but the Japanese tsunami has magnified the problem many times over. Pallister says the tsunami debris doesn't have the visceral impact of the Exxon Valdez spill, with oiled animals and blackened coastlines, but he thinks in the long run it could be a bigger environmental disaster.
In a lot of ways, it's a lot worse than the oil spill, both in the geographic scope of it and the chemicals that are coming with it. And who knows what the impacts are going to be. And they're going to be really difficult to measure because they're spread out spatially. And, you know, it's going to be a very difficult scientific issue to sort that all out, I think.
Officially, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has only recorded 20 tsunami debris items that have landed in Alaska, but the agency will only confirm an object if it has a unique identifier that can be traced back to Japan. The state of Alaska does not use the same strict standard. Last summer, the state paid for an aerial survey to inspect 2,500 miles of Alaska's coastline. Elaine Bussey Floyd is acting director of the Division of Environmental Health. She says the survey identified tsunami debris all along the flight path from southern southeast up to Prince William Sound and out the Alaska Peninsula.
There was tsunami debris literally on every beach that was that was photographed. They took over 8,000 pictures, and it was more widespread and greater quantities than we even expected.
But so far, there has been minimal funding for cleaning up the debris. Governor Sean Parnell didn't include any tsunami debris funding in his budget. NOAA is figuring out how to distribute a $5 million gift from Japan, and Alaska's congressional delegation is working to get federal funds. But tsunami debris cleanup money was stripped from a bill for Hurricane Sandy relief that passed this week.
Look at this mess here.
Back on the beach, as the waves crash in, Chris Pallister says the debris could have serious impacts on fisheries and subsistence resources.
I don't know if it's being taken seriously enough. I don't think a lot of people that are going to be impacted by it know how bad it is right now. And until that gets out, maybe not much is going to happen. But I think we're kind of getting to the tipping point now where a lot of people in the state and federal agencies realize the gravity of this situation, and they're all working pretty hard now to get a handle on the scope of the problem and trying to develop funding sources. But as of yet, that hasn't happened. But it's a huge problem. It's going to take years to clean this mess up.
Pallister guesses it will take tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars to remove the debris. On this day, though, he has to leave it all on the island.
All right, we better go back.
Okay. We take off in the helicopter and head north along the beach. Pallister looks out the window at all the debris below and says it just goes on and on and on. On Montague Island, I'm Annie Fight.
Welcome back. We'll look for southeasterly winds just about all areas, even over the inner channels. South winds up to 20 knots tomorrow afternoon for Lynn Canal. Easterly winds on the north coast. For the outlook on Tuesday, even lighter winds now, that low pressure area that could bring small craft advisory winds here along the south coast late tomorrow and tomorrow evening. That'll have pulled back to the west far enough so you're just left with these really light winds, variable to southeast, except Lynn Canal, still enough of a gradient there to possibly give 20-knot winds or more through the main canal there. For the North Gulf Coast, easterlies 15 to 20 knots, but lighter winds here down across the Barren Islands, and really light winds, light variable winds, Shelikof Strait right up into Cook Inlet. And then again, looking at that afternoon east wind condition coming out of Turnagain Arm, 20-25 knots, turning southeast over the northern areas. And then for Tuesday, same pattern again up here to the north, otherwise light variable winds, Prince William Sound, most of Cook Inlet, across the Barren Islands in Kamishak Bay and Shelikof Strait, north 15 on the east side of the island. Northeasterlies now, that low center coming back like this, so depending on its strength, it could produce 25-knot winds on the North Gulf Coast. Then for Bristol Bay, tomorrow, light variable winds, almost dead calm there, with westerlies at about 10 here down the coastline. The Alaska Peninsula, on the Pacific side, north 15 to just northeast 15, southwest of Kodiak. Those winds become light and variable the way it looks at this point in time. For Tuesday, southwest 10 for Bristol Bay. Southerly winds 20 knots across the peninsula. Could be some higher gusts late in the afternoon at Cold Bay. For the eastern Aleutians, pretty light tomorrow, 15 knots from a west or southwest direction. And then southwesterlies at about 20 here for the remainder of the Aleutian chain. And for Tuesday, west winds 20 knots there with southerly 30-knot winds west of Adak behind the front coming down a little bit there. But could be some gale force winds, minimum gales the way it looks right now, coming into the central Aleutians just ahead of that front. And then 25-knot southeast winds farther to the east across the Fox Islands. And for the southwest coast, pretty light winds from a southwest direction. Southerlies here, 15 knots north of Nunivak Island. And for the St. Lawrence Island area and also the northern Bering Sea, St. Matthew Island, as that front comes in, look for small craft advisories there to pick up. Could be even up to 30 knots right in advance of the front. But then dropping back off as it moves through for Tuesday, southeast 15 for St. Lawrence Island, about 20 knots here over the northern Bering Sea and the southwest coast, 15 to 20 knots. And the Pribilofs tending to come back up to 25 knots. For the Arctic coast, again, strongest winds will be on that east side, very brisk conditions tonight and again tomorrow there. 25 to 30 knots, 20 knots for the central coast, and then the lighter winds here all along the west side. And for Tuesday, probably kicking up a little bit here for the for this marine zone there west of Cape Lisburne and Point Hope. 15 knots, give or take, for this area, Kotzebue Sound. Southwest 15 for the coast, and then still east or east-southeast for the central coast. And not so strong, still possibility of a brisk wind advisory lingering up there for that eastern marine zone. And for tonight, this front continues to dissipate with now very little moisture even left here around the Kodiak Island area. The bulk of it's now dropped off to the southeast, and so just some scattered showers left behind in these areas, and possible evening showers up over the southern mountains here, but very nice up to the north. Just some flurries scattered around the Brooks Range area, eastern Arctic coast, and notice enough of a gradient there to keep those easterly winds blowing. And here's the next system pushing eastward, again bringing the wind and rain into the St. Lawrence Island area and across the northern Bering Sea during the day tomorrow. And very weak trough here, could kick off a couple of showers, but partly to mostly cloudy conditions. Sunshine just to the east there, a few isolated showers developing along the Alaska Range and possibly along the North Gulf Coast, though this is just some leftover moisture from the front that's dissipating currently there, and just a few isolated showers over the southeast coast along with some clearing. But again, lots of sunshine, temperatures back into the 50s, even the lower 60s in some areas. Pretty nice over the Aleutians there. Again, could be some pretty good VFR out here. But the eastern Aleutians catching the trailing edge of that warm front, keeping it a little cloudier. And then that system possibly bringing some rainfall into the north central interior on Tuesday, and some snow possible up along the Arctic coast. And then the next front bringing more wind and rain into the central Bering Sea. Have a good evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.